Hey guys, tonight we slip back nearly 2,000 years into a Rome that smells faintly of olive oil, wet cobblestone, and the distant temps of wood smoke. You're not just visiting, you're waking up here in a cramped, candlelit room where the walls are painted with fading reds and yellows, a thin blanket tangled around your legs. Somewhere outside, a mule cart clatters past, and you can already hear a fishmonger shouting about his catch. You probably won't survive this, but at least you'll have an interesting day. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where in the world we all drifting off from tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You pull the blanket aside and feel the chill from the stone floor. Your lodgings are above a tavern, the kind that smells like sour wine even at dawn. The single oil lamp on the stool flickers low, nearly spent. The bed, if you can call a straw mattress with lumpy stuffing, a bed creaks as you swing your legs down. You rub your eyes. Sleep was thin. Laughter and stomping from below kept you company through the night. You dress quickly, pulling on a faded tunic that's been mended so many times it's practically a patchwork map of your own clumsiness. In the corner, a wooden chest holds your work clothes, a brighter wrap, a wig smelling faintly of myrrh, and the worn leather sandals you've resoled twice this year. You'll need them later. For now, you head to the shuttered window and push it open. Dawn in Rome is noisy donkeys braying, street sweepers scraping up last night's debris, the distant thud of amphorae being unloaded. From here, you can see the edge of the Forum, already dotted with silhouettes moving briskly toward their trades. The air is damp, but not fresh. This is Rome, after all. You run your fingers through your hair, debating whether to braid it now or wait until after breakfast. Breakfast in this world isn't a feast. It's more likely a scrap of bread, maybe dipped in watered wine. Sometimes you splurge on olives or figs, but not today. The purse at your waist feels lighter than you'd like, and rent is due soon. As you gather your things, you step carefully over the warped floorboards, avoiding the spot that squeals. Your landlady claims it's a feature, part of the building's history. You suspect it's a feature designed to make you pay more attention. Down the narrow stairs, you pass the tavern's main room. The air is stale with smoke, the tables sticky from last night. A single sleepy-eyed boy is sweeping the floor, and he barely glances up as you pass. Outside, the sun is still low, turning the city's sandstone walls to a soft gold. You take a deep breath, well, as deep as the city's scent, a thousandth step into the day. There's work to be done, but it's not the kind of work anyone will put on a coin or carve in marble. You start with the little rituals, tightening your belt, checking your pouch, feeling for the small bronze charms tied inside your tunic. One is shaped like a phallosopost to ward off bad luck. The other is a tiny figure of Venus, worn smooth from your thumb's constant touch. Historians still argue whether most women in your trade really believed in such charms, or whether they were simply habit passed down from older hands who swore they worked. Your feet find the familiar rhythm of the cobblestones as you head toward the morning market. The smell of baking bread drifts from a nearby stall, making your stomach growl. You keep moving, your eyes scanning faces not for customers yet, but for trouble. The city's streets hold both in equal measure. Somewhere, a temple bell rings, and you feel the day pulling you forward. You'll sell yourself a dozen different ways before sunsets, sometimes with words, sometimes with a glance, sometimes with nothing more than showing up where you're expected to be. But right now, the city is waking, and so are you. You weave your way toward the market, the uneven cobblestones slick with morning dew. A few carts creak past, pulled by oxen whose horns are wrapped in colored cloths, some owner's attempt to keep away the evil eye. A baker's boy rushes by with a basket balanced on his hip, the smell of fresh bread trailing after him like a deliberate taunt. You think about buying a loaf, but decide to wait until you see how the day's coins fall. The marketplace is already waking, a restless animal stretching its limbs. Traders call out prices for figs and olives, their voices overlapping in a chaotic chorus. You pass a stall selling wool dyed in shades so bright they seem almost smug, and another with rows of amphorae filled with cheap wine. You head toward the perfume sellers, not the fine perfumers, near the Palatine, that S for people with more coins than Ubat, the market bargain stalls, where the scents are rough imitations of luxury. The merchant, a round-faced man with a permanent squint, waves you over. He knows you, knows your kind of business, and knows you can't pay full price. He offers a small clay vial of oil, scented with something meant to be myrrh. You dab a bit on your wrist. It smells halfway between flowers and goat. Still, you pay a few coins. You can meet clients smelling like last night's wine and someone else's cooking. As you leave, you slow near a fishmonger's stand, not because you want fish, but because it's a good spot to catch whispers. Two women stand nearby, gossiping with the intensity of priests reciting prayers. You overhear talk about a local magistrate's mistress, about which senator's son has been seen gambling away his inheritance, about a brothel in the Subura that's been taken under protection by someone important. The words are tossed like crumbs, but you gather them up. In your trade, information can be as valuable as coin. A barber shouts from across the way, trying to lure in customers with promises of a fresh shave and the latest jokes. His stall is little more than a stool, a blade, and a bucket, but the banter is free entertainment. He winks as you pass. Hair's looking fine, sweetheart. Could be finer with a trim. You smile, but keep walking. Time's short, and there's still more to prepare before the day truly begins. The soundscape is as vivid as the smells, traders slapping hands to seal deals, the squeal of pigs being led to slaughter, the rhythmic clang of a blacksmith working just beyond the market edge. You keep your ears open for more than gossip. Sometimes a voice stands out, a soldier's deep laugh, the sing-song tone of a merchant from far-off lands. These voices tell you who's in the city today, who might be wandering later, bored and with coins to spend. Historians still argue whether women like you spent mornings actively seeking clients, or whether most work came in the evenings. You know, the truth is less tidy. Every moment outside your room is potential business. A kind word to the baker today might mean a loaf on credit tomorrow. A shared joke with a wine seller might lead to an introduction to one of his patrons. You pass a fruit stall and notice a pile of pomegranates, their skins splitting to reveal jewel-like seeds. They remind you of last year's festival of Venus, when a drunken sailor bought you 3 in a row, swearing they'd bring you luck in love. You ate them anyway. The only luck they brought was a stomachache. Still, the memory makes you smile. Not all the interactions here are pleasant. A group of boys loiters near the fountain, tossing stones into the water and calling out to passing women. One makes a crude gesture in your direction. You've heard worse, but you still adjust your pace, putting a fishmonger stall between you and them. The stall owner gives you a sympathetic nod. Everyone here understands the unspoken rules: when to push back, when to step aside. You stop briefly at a stand selling trinkets, small bronze charms, colored beads, bits of carved bone. A tiny amulet shaped like a dolphin catches your eye. The merchant says it's for protection at sea, but you think it might be useful on land, too. You don't buy it now, but you file it away for later. The market is a web of paths, and you've walked them so many times you could navigate blindfolded. Yet each morning brings something new: a stranger's face, a half-heard rumor, a hint of opportunity. By the time you turn toward the baths, your pouch is lighter, your wrist smells faintly floral, and your mind is already working on where to be next. You step away from the clamor of the market, the sounds fading behind you like a closing door. Ahead lies the next stage of your morning: steam, water, and the subtle art of being seen without seeming to try. But for now, the cobblestones under your feet still hold the warmth of early sun, and the city hums around you like a living, breathing thing. The bathhouse rises from the street like a promise, stone walls streaked dark from years of steam escaping through unseen cracks. Doorways framed with carved lintels worn smooth by countless hands. You step inside, greeted first by warmth, then by the mingled scents of oil, wet tile, and something faintly metallic from the pipes. The echoes begin immediately: water splashing, voices bouncing off stone, the low murmur of a dozen conversations overlapping. You know the baths are not just for cleaning the skin there where deals are struck. Alliances formed, rumors traded like coins. For your trade, they're also a stage, a place to appear casually, as though you just happened to wander in, while letting the right people notice you. You hand over a small coin at the entrance. The attendant barely glances at you, too busy arguing with a man about whether the water is warmer yesterday than today. Historians still argue whether the average bathhouse kept strict temperature controls or simply let the heat fluctuate with the day's firewood. From your experience, it's the latter. Sometimes you nearly boil, other days you shiver. In the apoditerium, the changing room, you unfasten your belt and fold your outer tunic into a neat bundle. The other women here are a mix: matrons in expensive spas, younger girls with hair oiled and pinned just so, a few who, like you, are here less for relaxation and more for quiet advertisement. You note a courtesan you've seen before, draped in a gauzy wrap that somehow manages to seem accidental. She gives you a polite note acknowledgement without warmth. You slip into the tepidarium first, letting the mild heat wrap around you. The mosaic floor is slick under your feet, tiny tiles depicting dolphins and curling waves. You sink onto a stone bench, feeling the tension in your shoulders begin to ease. This is where small talk happens: soft voices, shared smiles. An older woman beside you complains about the price of olive oil, and you agree, slipping in a comment about knowing a merchant who gives better rates. It's harmless on the surface, but it plants your name where it might be repeated later. From the tepidarium, you move to the caldarium, the hot room. Steam curls up in lazy ribbons, clinging to hair and lashes. The heat makes your skin damp instantly, and your lungs feel heavy, but in a pleasant way. A pair of men stand near the far wall, half hidden by the mist, talking about a grain shipment stuck in Ostia. You recognize one as a merchant you've met before. He glances your way, but doesn't call out. Too many eyes here. Still, the look says he's noticed you. You take your time, letting the heat open your pores. A servant comes by with a stridula curved metal scraper hand. You accept it. The sensation of dead skin being scraped away is oddly satisfying, leaving you feeling raw and clean at once. The servant mutters that you carry a lot of city dust, and you laugh, telling him you walk more than any mule in Rome. After the heat, you step into the frigidarium. The cold bites instantly, stealing your breath. You dip quickly, knowing the shock will leave your skin flushed and firm. Some women linger here to gossip. Others, like you, move briskly through, unwilling to freeze for the sake of conversation. Back in the dressing area, you rub scented oil into your skin. Cheap oil, but enough to make you smell faintly of roses rather than smoke. This is the final act of the bathhouse ritual. Emerging back onto the street, looking refreshed, hair neatly pinned, skin glowing. You may have come in smelling of stale wine and market dust. You leave, ready to be seen. There is an unspoken understanding among those in your trade. The baths are where you maintain your public face. You can't control the cramped room you live in or the cracked leather of your sandals. But here, for an hour, you can seem like someone more polished. That illusion is often enough to change the way a potential client sees you. As you step outside, the midday sun feels hotter than expected. Your hair is still damp, your skin warm. You take a deep breath of the street, air less pleasant than the steam inside, but charged with energy. Somewhere nearby, a street musician plucks a cithara, the notes tumbling lazily into the air. You pause for a moment to listen. In the baths, you were one of many. Out here, you're back in the open theater of the city, where every glance might mean an invitation, a bargain, or a warning. You adjust the strap of your pouch and head toward your lodging. The next task of the day awaits, dressing for work in a way that will catch eyes without drawing the wrong kind of attention. But the scent of rose oil on your skin and the lingering warmth in your muscles make you walk a little taller, as though the steam and stone have given you something you can carry into the afternoon. Back in your room, the air feels cooler after the bathhouse heat, though it still carries the faint smell of last night's lamp oil. You close the shutters part way to let in enough light without inviting every passerby to stare. The room is barely large enough for the bed, the stool, and the wooden chest at its foot. That chest is where your costumes live, folded as neatly as their wear allows. Choosing what to wear isn't just about what looks nice. Strategy. Every color, every fabric, every accessory sends a signal. The wrong choice can make you look desperate, or worse, invisible. The right choice can turn a glance into a conversation, and a conversation into a coin. You lift the lid of the chest and run your hands over the fabric. At the top lies a saffron-dyed wrap, faded but still bright in the sun. Saffron is an expensive dye, too expensive for you to wear often without raising questions, but this piece was a gift from a client who fancied himself a poet. You still remember the ridiculous rhyme he recited when he gave it to you. Historians still argue whether saffron was widely worn by women in your trade, or whether the law restricted its use. In your experience, the only real restriction is whether someone will stop you in the street to ask how you could afford it. Beneath it is your most reliable, tunican-dyed wool, soft from years of wear, with a simple belt to cinch it. It's plain enough to avoid attention when you want to blend in, but with the right jewelry, it can look intentional. And then there are the wigs. One of dark, curled hair that frames your face, and another of lighter strands, braided loosely. Both smell faintly of the oils you use to keep them from drying out, though no amount of oil can mask the occasional scent of the head they were made from before you owned them. You set out a few pieces on the bed: the saffron wrap, the plainer tunic, the dark wig, the lighter one. You sit on the stool and look at them, weighing your mood against the day's possibilities. If you expect to walk the busier streets where traders pass through, you might choose the saffron. Let them think you're more expensive than you are. If you're staying closer to the taverns, the plain tunic will draw less unwanted challenge from other women who guard their territory like temple dogs. Your sandals sit by the bed. The leather straps are patched, the soles worn to fit your feet exactly. You wipe them down with a cloth, more for habit than effect, then fasten them snugly. Jewelry is minimal today: a bronze bangle, a pair of simple glass bead earrings. They're not real gems, but they catch the light enough to give the impression of something finer. As you dress, you remember a trick an older woman once told you: wear one thing that looks expensive, even if it's not. People fill in the rest themselves. Today, that thing will be the saffron wrap. You drape it loosely over your shoulders, letting it fall just so, as though you didn't spend several minutes arranging it in the tiny scrap of mirror you own. The mirror itself is a luxury, polished bronze that gives you a slightly warped reflection. You tilt it until the light catches your face in a way that flatters rather than emphasizes the tiredness under your eyes. A dab of perfume at your neck, a touch of oil smoothed over your hairline where the wig meets your skin, and you're done. Historians still debate whether wigs were worn daily or saved for special occasions. But for you, the wig is armor. It changes how people see you, and, more importantly, how you see yourself. Without it, you're just another woman trying to make rent. With it, you're someone they might follow down a street, someone whose name they might remember for a week or two. You place the rest of your clothing back in the chest, closing the lid softly. The room feels smaller when you're dressed for work, as though the walls lean in, aware of the performance you're about to step into. Outside, the noise of the street has shifted, less of the early morning market bustle, more of the steady hum of midday. Voices are sharper now, footsteps quicker. You take one last look in the mirror, adjust the wrap so it seems even more carelessly elegant, and slip your pouch onto your belt. The coins inside clink softly, a reminder of how thin the line is between eating well and going hungry. Then you open the door, stepping into the warm, sunlit corridor. The smell of roasting chickpeas drifts from somewhere down the street. You descend the narrow stairs, each creak underfoot familiar, and emerge into the Roman daylight, once again ready to take your place among the city's endless moving pieces, each of them wrapped in their own small performance. The street greets you with a wall of sound, the caw of crows overhead, the chatter of market-goers, the sharp whistle of a boy trying to draw attention to his basket of figs. You step aside just in time to avoid a mule cart, the driver clicking his tongue impatiently as the animal's hooves clatter over the uneven paving stones. The air smells of fresh bread and something far less pleasant wafting from the gutter. You breathe through your mouth for a moment, letting your eyes adjust to the shifting light between shadowed alleys and sunlit squares. Your walk to the marketplace is never just a stroll. It's a performance. Each step is measured to seem natural but intentional, the kind of pace that lets you be seen without looking like you're trying. The marketplace is the city's nervous system. Everything passes through here: news, goods, gossip, and the occasional opportunity. You weave through stalls of merchants, shouting over one another in Greek, Latin, and a dozen other tongues. A man selling dyed cloth catches your saffron wrap in his gaze and calls out an offer, certain he can sell you another at twice what you could ever pay. You smile without slowing, the smile that says, "I heard you, I'm flattered, but I'm not buying today." Historians still argue whether women in your trade were welcome in these central spaces or quietly discouraged. But the truth is, you've never been chased away unless you were blocking someone's coin flow. The market thrives on noise and movement, and you're just another part of the spectacle. You stop at a fig seller's stall and buy a handful with 2 small bronze coins. The figs are warm from the sun, their skins almost splitting. You bite into one, sweet and sticky, and let the juice run down your fingers before licking it away. It's a small indulgence. Half the joy of the market is these moments of sensory luxury. As you eat, you drift toward a knot of women haggling over baskets of olives. One of them notices your wrap and asks where you got it. You give her a half-true answer mentioning the poet, but not what you had to listen to in exchange. She laughs and tells you saffron doesn't suit everyone, but it works on you. Compliments in the market are like stray cats, nice when they appear, but not something you can rely on. A commotion breaks out a few stalls over. A young man has been caught trying to slip a string of garlic into his tunic without paying. The stallholder grabs his wrist and begins shouting for the watch. You drift to the edge of the crowd, forming around them not to intervene, but to watch how the drama unfolds. Theft here is as much a public performance as the market itself. Sometimes the crowd turns on the thief, sometimes on the seller, depending on who they think has less right to complain. You remember a trick one of your friends used to work in this chaos. Pretend to be caught up in the spectacle, and you can stand quite close to potential clients without drawing suspicion. The excitement of the crowd breaks their normal patterns. They're more likely to talk to you or to remember your face later. You try it now, catching the eye of a man near the front who wears a tunic just a little too clean for market work. He smiles faintly before looking away, but you've planted the seed. The market isn't just for food or cloth or trinkets. It's a clearinghouse for information. You hear whispers of a ship from Alexandria bringing spices, of a fight outside the tavern near the river docks, of a new magistrate rumored to be cracking down on public disorder, a term so broad it might as well be weather. You file it all away. Information can be worth more than coin, especially when it tells you where to be or not be after dark. A boy runs past, scattering pigeons, and nearly knocks over a jar of olive oil in his hurry. The stallholder curses, but the boy is gone. You finish your figs, dropping the stems into the gutter, and head toward the fishmonger's row. The smell hits you first, brine and scales, and something sharper. Here, the calls of the sellers are even louder, each claiming their catch is freshest. Quirky fact for the day: the fish sellers sometimes use ground-up shells to whiten their teeth, claiming it makes them more trustworthy looking. You wonder if it works, or if it just makes their smiles sharper. By midday, the market is at full tide. You've walked the lanes twice, letting yourself be seen, letting the saffron do its work. A few familiar faces nod as you pass a merchant who once bought you wine, a baker's wife who sometimes sends over die-old bread, a weaver who likes to gossip. The weaver tells you a gladiator parade is scheduled for tomorrow, and you make a mental note. Crowds mean business. Finally, you find a quieter spot near the edge of the square, shaded by an awning. From here, you can see both the main thoroughfare and the side street leading toward the taverns. You adjust your wrap again, lean casually against the post, and watch the flow of Rome move past you. Each face a possible story, each story a possible coin. The tavern door yawns open like a familiar mouth, breathing out a wave of sour wine, wood smoke, and the unmistakable temps of yesterday's spilled beer. You duck under the low lintel, blinking as your eyes adjust to the dim light inside. The ceiling beams hang heavy with soot, and every surface stable's benches, even the walls bears the sticky sheen of long use. Somewhere in the back, a lute plucks out a melody that's just on the edge of falling apart. You know this place well enough to find your corner without being told. The owner's wife, Marcia, raises an eyebrow at you from behind the counter. She's the real manager here, a sharp-eyed woman who keeps track of every cup poured and every coin collected. You slide onto a bench, nodding toward a jug on the shelf. She brings it without asking, thin wine, watered down, but still enough to loosen tongues. Historians still argue whether Roman taverns were open to anyone or kept certain undesirable trades on the fringes. From your lived reality, no one's ever turned away someone with coin in hand. The tavern is an equalizer. Dock workers, soldiers, scribes, even the occasional merchant's son, all end up on the same benches. Once the cups start passing, the floor underfoot is packed earth, sprinkled with sawdust to soak up whatever spills are. Worse fall there. Near the hearth, two men argue over a game of dice, one slamming his fist into the table so hard the cups jump. You can tell from the way their shoulders are squared that this will either end in laughter or a brawl. You keep your wine and your distance. Part of your reason for coming here is business, not direct, coin-in-hand business, but networking. Taverns hum with possibility. You overhear a group of sailors talking about a ship delayed in Ostia, their voices thick with annoyance and cheap wine. That could mean stranded passengers with nothing to do but spend coin in the city. Another table hosts a pair of bricklayers, one of whom keeps glancing at you with the hesitant curiosity of someone not quite ready to speak. You let him look. Sometimes the gaze is the first sale. Marcia swings by to refill your cup, leaning in to mutter that a certain money changer has been asking after you. You file that away. Could be good, could be trouble. Often it's both. A young lute player wanders closer, playing a melody you recognize from the Floralia festival. He grins at you between verses. You toss him a small copper, not for the song, but for the message it sends. You're approachable, but you don't work for free. Quirky tidbits. Some taverns here keep a house pet, usually a cat, as much for the mice as for the customers. This one has a tabby that patrols the benches like a tiny, furry magistrate. It rubs against your ankle, then hops up onto the bench beside you, as though claiming you for inspection. Halfway through your second cup, a man with a faded military cloak sits down across from you without asking. He smells faintly of olive oil and iron. He tells you, without introduction, that he's just come from Britannia, and that the weather there is worse than bad wine. You make the appropriate sympathetic noise, and let him talk. Travelers are like rainstorms. Sometimes they pass through harmlessly. Sometimes they drench you with opportunity. The dice game near the hearth erupts into shouts. One man claims the other switched dice mid-roll, which in this crowd is only slightly less offensive than theft from the emperor himself. Marcia strides over and diffuses it with a practiced combination of threats and charm. You've seen her do it a dozen times. She could probably negotiate peace between rival legions. You sip slowly, letting the warmth of the wine seep into your limbs. Outside, the light has shifted. Late afternoon now, that golden edge before the shadows lengthen. The tavern's regulars are trickling in from the day's labor, bringing fresh stories and fresh coin. At a nearby table, a merchant boasts about a shipment of Syrian glass arriving next week. You make a note: luxury goods bring luxury buyers. Another man complains about a tax collector, and you make a different kind of note: angry men with problems sometimes look for comfort that can be taxed. You catch Marcia's eye and slide her a small coin as you stand. She nods, understanding the unspoken message. You've had your fill, made your connections, and it's time to move on before the night crowd tips from lively to dangerous. Stepping outside, you feel the city's pulse. Again the street hums with movement, the air thick with the smells of cooking fires and the sharper temps of the tanner's yard nearby. The sun sits low, and the first oil lamps are flickering to life in shop fronts. You draw your saffron wrap a little closer, ready to see where the evening will carry you. The street outside is shifting into its evening rhythm, shadows stretching long across the worn flagstones. Voices mellowing, and the air growing heavier with the smell of roasting meat from a nearby stall. You've left the tavern's warmth behind, but you haven't left the business of the night. You turn toward a neighborhood you know well, where the buildings lean over the alleyways as if gossiping with one another, and where the clientele isn't found in marble colonnades, but in the humble, work-worn streets. This is where you meet the everyday Romans: bakers with flour still on their tunics, porters whose backs bear the map of their labor, water sellers with arms thick from carrying amphorae all day. They don't come here for politics or poetry. They come for small pleasures they can afford. And that means you need to adjust your approach. You, Dan T., step into these encounters with the high polish allure, wherefore a merchant's banquet. Here, you soften your presence. Your smile is warmer, less calculating. You let your conversation drift toward familiar worries, the cost of grain, the rumor of a new aqueduct, the latest street singer who's making people laugh. Historians still argue whether most Roman prostitution happened in grand brothels or scattered across the city in quieter, semi-private spaces. Walking these streets, you know the answer isn't simple. Tonight, you find yourself pausing near a candlemaker's stall, where the owner, an old acquaintance, greets you with a grin. His cousin is loitering nearby, a shy man with calloused hands, who seems fascinated by the way you hold his gaze. The candlemaker knows your trade, but he doesn't shame it. In fact, he tells you in a low voice that a group of men from the docks are pooling coin to celebrate a good week. You nod. That's an opportunity worth following later. Quirky tidbit: many working women here carry a little bell or wear shoes with hobnails that leave suggestive patterns in the dust. It's a subtle form of advertising. Tonight, you've left the bell at home, but your sandals have just enough decoration to catch the eye. A young baker notices. You can tell by the way he accidentally lingers when passing with a tray of still warm flatbreads. The neighborhood hums with its own tempo. You pass a doorway where an elderly woman is telling fortunes for a single copper. She calls after you, offering to reveal a man in red who will change your life. You wave her off with a laugh. You've already met enough men in red cloaks to know better. In a small open square, children chase each other around a dry fountain. Their laughter mixes with the clink of amphora lids at a nearby wine shop. You stop there briefly, chatting with the shopkeeper who once introduced you to a group of traveling traders. He offers you a small cup on the house, and you accept it pays to keep connections lubricated in more ways than one. A pair of stonemasons approach, smelling faintly of dust and lime. They ask, half joking, if you're available for company tonight. You deflect with a practiced mix of humor and ambiguity. You don't take every offer, especially not in the middle of the street. But you plant a seed. Tell them where you might be later, should they decide to follow through. The sun has fully slipped away now, replaced by the flicker of oil lamps mounted on doorways and shopfront. The street feels different in this light, more secretive, more intimate. You cross paths with a fishmonger heading home, the temps of the sea trailing him like a second cloak. He grumbles about a magistrate's new tax, and you commiserate. Nothing bonds strangers faster than shared annoyance at the powerful somewhere above. A shutter creaks open, and a voice calls your name. It's Flavia, another woman in the trade, who rents a small upstairs room. She tosses down a fig wrapped in a scrap of cloth for sweetness later. She says, you wave, tucking it into your bag. It's moments like this that keep the network alive. Favors flow like water, and you never know when you'll need to call one in. The docksmen the candlemaker mentioned are easy to spot later. Gathered in a half-lit courtyard, their laughter loud enough to carry down the alley. You pass through casually, exchanging a few teasing words. No need to push. The invitation is already hanging in the air like the scent of roasting chestnuts nearby. Before you leave the neighborhood, you take a slow walk past the public fountain. It's a good meeting place. People linger here, even after dark, the splash of water masking conversations. A man you've seen once before, grain counter from the forum, gives you a tentative nod. You return it, letting the possibility hang. Business is a long game, and not every opportunity needs to be seized immediately. By the time you start back toward the busier streets, you've planted enough seeds to know some will sprout by tomorrow. You pull your wrap tighter against the night air, aware that in this city, the real work often starts after the lamps are lit. You leave the modest hum of the neighborhood behind and step into a busier artery of the city, where the lamps burn brighter and the smells are bolder. Spiced meat sizzling on skewers, olive oil warming in deep pans, a faint temps of amphora wine poured fresh. Here, your aim isn't quiet conversation or the subtle art of planting seeds. Here, you perform. Street performances are one of your favorite tools, partly because they draw a crowd and partly because they give you a mask to wear. When you're singing, dancing, or acting out a snippet of some scandalous myth, people see a character, not just a woman for hire. That separation lets you gauge interest without making anyone feel cornered. You find your spot under a torch fixed to a building's wall, where its light spills wide enough to make you visible, but not harsh enough to show every flaw. The paving stones here are scuffed smooth from decades of sandals shuffling during shows like this. You adjust your stance. Let your wrap fall slightly off one shoulder, just enough to catch the eye, and start with a playful retelling of the story of Venus and Mars caught in Vulcan's net. A few passers-by, slow to watch. A pair of young scribes nudge each other, probably debating whether they should linger. An older man in a faded tunic chuckles at your dramatic gasp when the gods are exposed to all Olympus. Historians still argue whether most Roman street entertainment was officially licensed or tolerated in a wink and nod way. From what you've seen, as long as you aren't blocking a senator's litter or stirring unrest, the vigils will leave you be. As the small crowd grows, you switch to a little dance, nothing overtly scandalous, just a playful sway and a rhythmic step that pairs with the beat of a hand drum played by a fellow performer nearby. You two have an unspoken pact. He draws the rhythm, you draw the eyes, and then you share the coins dropped into the shallow basket at your feet. Here's a quirky tidbit UVA picked up. Some performers dust their hair or clothes with crushed mica to catch the lamplight. Tonight, you've done it too, and every turn of your head sends a faint shimmer across your cheek. People notice. They always do. The scribes finally drift closer, pretending they're just here for the song. You throw a teasing line there, way something about men who write all day, needing a better story at night. They laugh, but one looks away shyly. You don't press it. Sometimes planting intrigue works better than pressing an offer. A vendor selling honey cakes wanders past, the warm, sticky smell curling into your performance space. You improvise, weaving him into the story, declaring him the ambrosia bearer of the gods. The crowd loves it, and more coins clink into the basket. The honey cake seller winks, and later, he'll probably slip you one for free. The vigils pass once, their bronze helmets catching the light. You give them a respectful nod without stopping your tale. They don't linger. UVA learned to keep your performances light-hearted. When the crowd is at its thickest, you draw the story to a close with a bow, then step back as the hand drummer shifts into a brisk rhythm for his own act. You crouch to gather the coins, more than you expected for such a short set hand. Slip them into a small cloth pouch tied at your waist. But more valuable than the coins are the faces you've marked tonight. You spot the older man in the faded tunic, still lingering at the edge, pretending to study a nearby stall. You recognize the type, curious, cautious, and likely willing to pay for discretion. You offer him a brief smile before moving on, letting him decide whether to follow. The street's energy is high now, with performers spaced along its length. A juggler tossing clay cups, a woman balancing a clay jar on her head while walking a narrow beam, a storyteller using shadow puppets against a whitewashed wall. It's a reminder that in Rome, entertainment isn't just in the amphitheater, it's woven into daily life. And for someone in your line of work, it's a fertile hunting ground. You wander toward another torchlit corner, where two flute players are setting up. Music always softens the edges of a crowd, makes people more open to lingering. You stop to watch, knowing that your presence alone, framed by music, can be enough to spark conversations. One of the flute players recognizes you from a past festival. He tilts his head toward a trio of traders standing nearby, telling you without words that they might be worth your time. You slide into their orbit casually, commenting on the melody, the weather, anything but business. Set your eyes, do the rest. When you finally leave the busier street for a quieter lane, you're carrying more than just coins. You've collected invitations, some implied, some expliciting, left a trail of curiosity behind you. The night is far from over, and there's still more of Rome's shifting stage to play upon. The quieter lane you slip into is lined with low, shadowed doorways, their wooden lintels worn smooth from decades of knocks and greetings. Here, the noise of the wider city is muffled, and the air carries the faint sweetness of incense burned hours ago in a nearby shrine. This is the district where whispers hold as much value as coin, and your goal now isn't to draw attention, but to slip between the folds of conversation like silk. Taverns and wine shops are the beating heart of this quieter scene. By day, they serve workmen and errand runners. By night, they transform into dim-lit hubs where the hum of voices blends with the slosh of liquid in amphory. You push open a door to one such place, a narrow room lit by a single oil lamp swinging from a chain. The smell is a mix of sour wine, warm bread, and damp tunics. The tavern keeper greets you with the nod of someone who knows the rules. No names asked, no stories shared unless volunteered. You slip onto a low stool near the corner, draping your shawl so its folds fall artfully, hiding just enough of your face to make someone lean closer to see you properly. That's the trick. Don't sell, suggest. In a corner, two men speak in hushed tones about a grain shipment delayed in Ostia. You're not in the grain trade, but you know a conversation like that means money changing hands soon, and money means someone might be in the mood to spend. You catch the eye of one of them briefly, not long enough to be blatant, just enough to leave a question in his mind. Historians still argue whether women in your profession in Rome operated entirely independently, or if most were under Aleno or Lena's control. From what you've seen, it's a spectrum. Some answer to no one but themselves, while others work out of managed houses or under the watchful eye of a protector. Tonight, you're on your own, and that means every move must count. You nurse a watered wine slowly, letting its thin sweetness linger on your tongue. The tavern's rhythm is gentle, quiet murmurs, the occasional clink of pottery, the soft scrape of sandals. You watch a younger man across the room fidget with his cup, glancing your way more than once. He's new here, or new to this. You don't approach yet. You let him build his courage like steam in a sealed jar. A quirky detail you've picked up about these taverns. Some have secret signals for discreet services. A lamp set low in the corner might mean the house is tolerant of private arrangements. A certain style of painted vine on the wall might tell you the same. Here, the pattern of ivy curling along the beam above the bar isn't just decoration, it's an invitation, though most outsiders wouldn't know it. Eventually, the younger man stands, smoothing his tunic as if the wrinkles matter. He hesitates, then walks toward your table. You greet him with the faintest smile, letting the silence between you stretch just enough to make him speak first. He offers a compliment about your shala safe opening, and you respond with something light. The exchange is brief, but you know when a door has been opened. You don't always seal an arrangement on the spot. Sometimes it's better to plant a seed in someone's mind and let it grow overnight. People often return the next evening, or the one after, when curiosity has worked its slow magic. In the meantime, you keep the conversations warm but fleeting, making each encounter feel like a secret worth keeping. As you leave the tavern, You pass through the narrow back alley where the smell of baking bread from a nearby oven fills the cool air. The contrast, the warmth of the bread, the chill of the stones under your sandals makes you shiver in a way that feels almost luxurious. This is your favorite moment of the night, the brief transition between one stage and another, where you can drop the act and simply breathe. But your work isn't finished. There's a little wine shop 2 streets over with an outdoor bench where people sit late into the night. It's lit only by the glow from the shop's doorway, which means faces are half-shadowed, words are half-heard, and everything feels like it might be part of a dream. You settle there, pretending to be listening to the shopkeeper's nephew tell a story about a racing chariot gone out of control, while your real attention is on the man seated just far enough away to feign disinterest. He's older, dressed in a cloak that's fine enough to signal comfort, but plain enough to suggest he values discretion. When his eyes meet yours, it's brief, and that's all you need. You toss a comment toward the group about how even the best charioteers can't control everything. And though it's meant for everyone, you're speaking to him. He hears it. The shop's nephew finishes his story with an exaggerated flourish, and the group laughs. You let the moment pass, then stand, giving the older man a slow nod before disappearing into the night. This is the rhythm of your quieter work, touch and retreat, hint and vanish. You never know which seed will sprout, but you've learned that patience is often as profitable as boldness. You wander from the wine shop toward the busier artery of the Subura, the city's most restless quarter, where the lines between day and night blur into one long, flickering stream of human motion. The clatter of carts on uneven paving stones echoes off cramped walls, and above you, laundry flaps like surrender flags in the moonlight. Here, you aren't, just another faisure, a moving piece in a crowd that feeds off its own chaos. The main thoroughfare feels like a parade that never ends. Bakers selling still warm loaves straight from the oven shout over fishmongers who swear their catch is fresher than the Tiber itself. A man hawks tiny clay lamps carved into the shape of Venus, claiming they bring luck in love. Whether anyone believes him doesn't matter. He's selling them faster than a senator sells empty promises. You thread through knots of merchants, freedmen, slaves running errands, and the occasional toga-wrapped official pretending not to notice the side alleys. In the glow of torchlight, the city seems to wear a mask racks in plaster softened, shadows turning grime into mystery. It's the perfect stage for you to make your presence known without saying a word. Historians still argue whether Roman streetwalking was regulated strictly or tolerated so long as it stayed in certain districts. From where you stand, it's a dance between visibility and deniability. You want to be noticed, but not so directly that an overzealous magistrate decides you remaking too much trouble for the evening patrol. As you move through the crowd, you switch from the small, private gestures you used in the tavern to larger, more visible ones, adjusting the clasp of your stola just enough to reveal the richer weave underneath, tilting your chin when passing a group of men so that torchlight catches your eyes. It's theater, and you've learned your role by heart. The suburb's night market is a maze of smells: honey cakes dusted with poppy seeds, skewered meat sizzling over charcoal, wine thick and sweet as syrup. You pause at a stall selling figs, selecting one with deliberate care before biting into its soft flesh. It's not just about the taste, it's the motion, the slow press of your teeth, the way juice runs across your lip. People notice a quirky detail about this quarter. Some stall owners hire complimenters, paid flatterers, whose job is to call out approving remarks to passersby. They make the place sound more alive, like a soundtrack to a play. Tonight, one calls after you, comparing your walk to that of Livia Drusilla herself, a compliment both extravagant and politically risky, but you take it with a smirk. You spot a familiar face near a brazier, a merchant who once offered to pay in silver spoons rather than coin. You refused, but you remember his laugh, big and rolling, the kind that makes people turn to look. You slip near enough to exchange a casual greeting, letting him think it was his idea to seek you out. He gestures toward the warmth of the brazier, and you accept, both of you watching as chestnuts crackle in their shells. Your conversation drifts between the day's events and half-joking plans to meet accidentally at the circus next week. You don't press him for arrangements. Instead, you leave him with a lingering glance, the kind that promises there's more to talk about when the time is right. Business in the street is about planting flags, not planting roots. From the corner of your eye, you notice two vigils roams night watchmaking their slow sweep. They aren't hunting trouble, but they'll take it if they find it. You pull your shawl higher, shifting your stance to look more like a weary shopper than a working woman. It's a small camouflage, but it works. They pass by without pause. The crowd thins slightly as you drift toward the street, where entertainers set up flute players with nimble fingers, jugglers tossing clay cups, a man with a trained monkey that collects coins in a tiny basket. Here, the air is full of laughter, the kind that softens suspicion. You lean against a wall, letting the music wash over you. It's not just a performance for the audience, it's cover for you. Someone presses a small piece of paper into your hand before vanishing back into the crowd. It's barely larger than a coin, scrawled with a simple word and a time. You don't know if it's a joke, a trap, or an invitation, but you tuck it into your belt anyway. These little mysteries are part of what keeps the street alive, for you each one a new thread to follow or ignore. A stray dog trots by, stopping to sniff at a discarded skewer before moving on. You envy him briefly, no schedules, no calculations, before laughing at yourself for even thinking it. You shake the thought away and head toward a stall selling hot mulled wine, the spicy scent rising in the cool air. As you sip, the world feels softer, the noise just a little more musical. By the time you leave the market, the torches are burning lower, shadows stretching longer across the uneven cobblestones. The night's work isn't over, but the street's pulse has shifted slower now, like the city itself is taking a breath. And in that pause, you step lightly, blending back into the river of faces and flickering light, ready for the next turn in the dance. You turn down a narrower lane, one of those twisting little arteries that feeds the heart of Rome's commercial life. The chatter fades to a low murmur here, replaced by the more focused noises of business coins clinking into scales, fabric being shaken out for display, and the occasional cough from a shopkeeper bored enough to count dust motes. Here is where the deeper negotiations happen. Not the shouted prices over a fish stall, but the careful, measured tones of people with something specific in mind. You pass a workshop with oil lamps glowing behind thin linen curtains. The smell of hot beeswax tells you someone inside is making votive figurines. Next door, a cobbler sits on a low stool, hammering nails into a sandal sole, each tap as precise as a heartbeat. For you, these quieter lanes are not just shortcuts, they're opportunities. You can walk slowly, let your sandals click against the stones, and draw the occasional glance without competing with the chaos of the Subura. It's a more subtle hunting ground, a place for conversations that feel private even when they aren't. Historians still argue whether women in your trade would actively strike deals in such spaces, or if the custom was to attract attention in busier, more public forums. Standing here, you can see the advantage: fewer eyes, longer pauses, more room to gauge someone's intentions without interference. A cloth merchant, leans against his doorway, a folded bolt of dyed wool tucked under his arm. He greets you with the easy familiarity of someone who's traded more than just fabric over the years. You step close enough to examine the cloth, running your fingers across its rough texture, listening as he casually mentions that he's expecting a shipment from Alexandria: spices, oils, maybe some perfume. It's the kind of detail you file away. A man with access to imported perfume can be a valuable friend. You move on, pausing to greet an old woman selling garlands of rosemary and laurel. She tells you, with a wink, that wearing laurel tonight will ward off bad luck. You buy a small sprig, tucking it into your belt, not because you believe it, but because gestures like this make you part of the street's living fabric. The further you go, the more specialized the shops become. There's a tiny apothecary with jars labeled in a scribbling hand, their contents ranging from ground oyster shell to dried poppy heads. The smell is sharp and layered, a mixture of vinegar, herbs, and something faintly metallic. You linger in the doorway long enough for the owner to offer you a sample of his newest salve. Good for the joints, he claims, though you suspect it's mostly olive oil and crushed mint. The quirky thing about these tradespeople is how their products sometimes become part of your own performance. A dab of perfumed oil from a friendly merchant, a strip of bright ribbon from a weaver's offcut. These little touches build your image, piece by piece, without spending half your coin. You stop at a baker's stand, its low counter stacked with round loaves still warm from the oven. The baker's son, barely in his teens, shuffles over to offer you a piece of crust. You thank him, tearing it slowly and letting the steam curl into the cool air. The rhythm of eating here is as much about being seen as it is about filling your stomach. People remember the small rituals. The street narrows further, lanterns now hanging low enough to brush your hair if you aren't careful. It's here you spot a man in a deep green cloak, his hood drawn low. He's pretending to examine a potter's goods, but glances your way more than once. You drift past him without stopping, but your pace slows, giving him the choice to follow. He does, though not immediately. He knows the game too. You turn into another side street, this one lined with shuttered doorways. There's just enough lamplight to see his shadow stretching behind you. You pause beside a niche with a small clay statue of Mercury, pretending to adjust your sandal strap. By the time you straighten, he's within arm's length. His voice is low, almost lost in the quiet. He makes a simple request. No bargaining, no flattery, just a direct offer and a time. You agree with a nod, then step aside so he can pass, the exchange clean and without ceremony. Some clients prefer it that way. No games, no drawn-out negotiations. As you make your way back toward the main road, you pass a pair of gossiping women standing beside a basket of figs. One laughs loudly enough for you to catch the joke about a local politician's secret visits to a wine seller's wife. You smile to yourself. These little rumors circulate like currency, traded freely for amusement or advantage. Near the lane's end, you see an old acquaintance, one of the street performers, who juggles knives for coins. He greets you warmly, balancing a blade on his palm as he talks. You slip him a small coin, not for the act, but for the unspoken agreement that performers and women like you look out for one another. A little warning here, a helpful distraction there. It keeps the street safer for everyone. By the time you step back into the broader light of the main market, you've made 3 new connections, secured 1 firm arrangement, and added a sprig of laurel to your belt. Not a bad haul for an hour's walk. You blend into the crowd again, the noise swelling around you like a tide, ready to carry you wherever the next opportunity waits. The heat from the midday sun pushes you into the shade, where the air is thick with the scent of fermenting grapes and crushed olives. You've drifted into the wine cellar's quarter, a place where time feels slower, the conversations deeper, and the coins heavier. The entrances are wide open to the street, and you can see the rows of clay amphorae leaning against the walls, each marked with painted letters to show their origin. Falernian for those with coin to burn, sourer vintages for the rest. The man behind the counter is decanting wine into a smaller jug for a customer, his forearms slick with sweat, his eyes flick toward you, brief, assessing, and you recognize that look. Not one of surprise or judgment, but calculation. You've been here before. He knows your name, your preferences, the way you lean against the counter when you're ready to talk. Wine shops like this aren't just for drinking. They're places where deals form quietly in corners, where gossip leaks like spilled wine onto the floor. Historians still argue whether brothels and wine shops were often one and the same, but anyone who spends time here can see how easily the two overlap. The back rooms are curtained off, their entrances shadowed, and the low hum of conversation in the dark is a language of its own. You step inside, the light dimming instantly. The air smells of oak and resin, mingled with the musk of too many bodies in a confined space. Benches line the walls, worn smooth by years of elbows and backsides. A few men glance up as you pass. One nods, another smiles in that half-hearted way that might turn into something later. The wine cellar offers you a cup without asking, the rim chipped but clean. You take it, the liquid inside a deep, rich red that catches what little light filters through the doorway. It's warm wine in Rome, almost always is, but the taste is sharp, almost floral, and you let it roll over your tongue before swallowing. A man at the far bench is watching you. His tunic is plain but well cut, his sandals clean, his beard neatly oiled. Not a laborer, then. You wander over, cup in hand, and stand just far enough away to give him the choice. He gestures to the empty space beside him. You sit, the bench creaking softly. He asks how business is code for whether you're looking for work now or later. You tell him it's steady, but there's room for the right offer. He laughs at that, a quiet, rumbling sound, and mentions that he's here to meet someone. You don't press, but you note the way his hand rests casually over the purse at his belt. The quirky thing about these places is that they're memory traps. A certain laugh, a scent of rosemary from a patron's cloak, the echo of someone's sandals on the floorboards, they stick in your mind. A week from now, you might hear that sound again in a completely different street and remember this exact moment. The man excuses himself after a few minutes, leaving you to sip your wine and watch the door. Another figure slips in, a woman you know from the Subura, her bracelets jangling as she moves. She sees you and smiles wide, settling across from you with a cup of her own. Her voice drops low, and she tells you about a merchant in from Antioch who's been asking around for companionship for the next few nights. You both know what that means. Historians still debate whether these networks of word-of-mouth referrals among women like you were formal arrangements or just casual favors. Whatever the case, it works. Your friend's tip could mean several nights of well-paid work if you play it right. You thank her with a promise to return the favor, then finish your cup, the warmth in your belly making the shadows feel softer. Outside, the sun is sliding west, painting the street in honey gold light. You linger at the threshold, letting the scene imprint itself, the amphory, the murmur of voices, the faint sweet temps of wine in the air. From here, you turn toward the olive press at the edge of the quarter. The press is still running, the wooden beam creaking under the weight of its stone counterweight, oil dripping into clay basins below. The pressman waves you closer, offering a small dish of fresh oil with a chunk of bread to dip. It's grassy, almost peppery, the kind of flavor you'd expect to find in a senator's kitchen rather than a public stall. As you chew, a group of sailors passes by, their laughter rough and unrestrained. One breaks off to call something teasing your way. You toss a remark back without missing a beat. They keep walking, the sound of their boots fading into the mix of voices, creaks, and bird calls that make up the street's constant hum. You slip away before the crowd thickens again, taking a back path toward your usual haunts. Your senses feel heightened, the smell of bread baking somewhere nearby, the cool shadow of a tall wall brushing across your skin, the weight of the laurel sprig at your belt. You can almost hear the city breathing in and out through every transaction, every meeting, every shared cup of wine. By the time you reach the next crossroad, you've carried with you not just the taste of Falernian and oil, but 2 pieces of information that could turn into coin before the week is out. The night is still ahead, and Rome's streets are full of doors waiting to open if you know how to knock. The late afternoon light slants across the paving stones, turning the dust a warm ochre. You step into the small square where a row of public baths waits, the facade plain compared to the grand thermae, but no less important to the people who slip in and out. The air smells faintly of wet limestone and wood smoke from the furnace beneath the floors. The hum of voices drifts through the open doorway, punctuated by the occasional splash or burst of laughter. This isn't a place for grandeur. It's the sort of neighborhood balneum where laborers come to scrub away the grime of the day. Merchants wash off the sweat of bargaining. And yes, you sometimes find clients who enjoy the convenience of mixing business with a bath. Historians still argue whether smaller baths like these were informal hubs for prostitution or simply convenient meeting points. But to you, the answer has always been obvious: water loosens tongues, and steam blurs the edges of propriety. You pay the modest entry fee to the balneator, a wiry man with a face like sun-baked clay. He nods and hands you a worn wooden token, the smoothness of it speaking to years of use. The changing room smells of oil and damp towels. You tuck your belongings into a cubby, keeping only a small pouch at your hip tied tight. The first wave of heat hits as you enter the tepidarium, the warm room where people linger before moving on to hotter spaces. The walls are coated with plaster, pale and streaked with condensation. A pair of women chat quietly near one corner, their voices lilting in the sing-song accent of the countryside. You ease onto a bench, letting your muscles adjust to the heat. The caldarium, the hot room, is another matter entirely. The steam is thick, curling off the surface of a sunken pool like low clouds. You wade in, the water rising to your chest, and close your eyes against the sting. This is the place where deals happen without words, where a shared smile, a casual brush of the arm, is enough to signal intent. A man you recognize slips into the water nearby. He's a baker from 3 streets over, the one whose ovens send the smell of warm bread through the air at dawn. He greets you with that easy friendliness that might or might not lead somewhere, depending on his mood and his coin. Today, he seems more interested in gossip. Between the steam and the echo of water against stone, his voice is almost hypnotic as he talks about a recent magistrate's edict. The quirky thing about baths is that they're equalizers, at least for an hour or two. The merchant who haggled over every coin with you in the marketplace yesterday sits shoulder to shoulder with a cart driver. The senator's son, stripped of his fine tunic, looks no different from the wine shop apprentice, though his manicure might give him away if you look closely enough. Once you've had your fill of the caldarium, you move to the frigidarium, the cold plunge. The shock of the water is a clean, biting slap to the senses, and you gasp as you sink in. Across from you, a pair of young men dive in laughing, splashing each other like boys in a stream. Their laughter echoes against the tiled walls, filling the room with an energy that cuts through the slow, heavy heat of the previous chambers. On your way back toward the changing room, you pass the massage tables. Here, attendants rub oil into the skin, scraping away dirt and dead cells with curved shoulders. One attendant, a broad-shouldered woman with hair bound tight, catches your eye and smirks. She's seen you here before, and she knows you sometimes linger just long enough for a certain client to appear. Historians still debate whether bath attendants acted as intermediaries between clients and sex workers. But you've seen the subtle exchanges, a glance, a nod, a whispered name. You leave the baths feeling cleaner in body, but also richer in information. Back outside, the sky has begun to turn lavender, the air cooler. You catch a whiff of roasting chestnuts from a street vendor, and your stomach growls. You buy a small paper twist of them, the heat of the nuts seeping into your palm, and eat as you walk. The route home or to work, depending on how you look at it, takes you past the mosaic workshop. The craftsman is working late, hammering tiny chips of colored stone into a floor panel. You pause to watch, the rhythm of his tools, almost meditative. He glances up and grins, showing teeth stained with wine. You nod back, your mind already turning over the possibilities for the evening. Because the baths aren't just a place to wash there, a place to plant seeds. A conversation in the steam room might turn into a meeting tomorrow. A passing remark from a chatty client could point you toward a festival where coin will flow freely. The connections you make in these quiet, humid rooms often prove more valuable than the bath itself. By the time you reach your street, the chestnuts are gone. Your hair smells faintly of mineral water, and your skin glows from the heat. You feel a little lighter, a little more prepared to meet the night. And somewhere in the city, you know someone else is stepping out of the baths, thinking about you, maybe already planning where to find you next. The sun dips lower, and the long shadows of the insulated multi-story apartment buildings stretch across the narrow street. You slow your pace as the familiar hum of the market reaches your ears. The marketplace isn't just for food and goods. It's a stage, a web, and, if you're sharp enough, a gold mine of opportunity. The air here is thick with the smell of frying fish, fresh bread, and the sharp tang of pickled olives. Merchants call out their wares in voices polished by years of repetition, the rise and fall of their pitches almost musical. You pass a stall selling bolts of dyed wool, deep crimson, rich saffron, and a blue so vivid it almost hums. That blue, you know, comes from imported indigo, expensive and rare, a color that can draw the eye in ways more subtle than any overt proposition. You've learned to move through the crowd as if you belong everywhere and nowhere. One moment you're listening to a fishmonger talk about the river's fickle moods. The next, you're drifting toward a knot of men arguing over the price of Syrian glassware. Historians still argue whether marketplaces were socially acceptable places for women like you to mingle without suspicion. But in practice, no one questions someone who looks like they have purpose, and your purpose shifts as the wind does. The quirky thing about markets is how quickly they transform. By midday, they're a chaotic tide of elbows, baskets, and shouted bargains. By evening, the energy turns playful vendors, more willing to flirt, customers more willing to linger. It's here you might catch the glance of someone curious, someone with a purse that jingles. A seller of spiced dates offers you a sample. You take it with a smile, the sweetness melting on your tongue, the sticky syrup clinging to your fingers. Near the pottery stalls, a man in a faded but well-kept tunic examines amphory. You recognize him. Last time, he left a tip generous enough to cover your rent for 3 days. You slide into the conversation like a shadow, asking about the clay's origin, letting the familiarity of your voice do the work. Sometimes, in these moments, your trade isn't physical at all. It's about being seen, remembered, desired in the abstract. That alone can lead to future arrangements. There's a rhythm to market talk, casual greetings, shared gossip, and the occasional deep laugh that tips the conversation into warmer territory. You join a circle listening to a storyteller whose voice has the power to hush a dozen clattering stalls. His tale is about a fisherman and a dolphin who trades him pearls in exchange for friendship. It's not the story itself that interests you, but the faces around you, faces softened by the spell of words, more open to connection afterward. You slip between stalls, selling garam, the fermented fish sauce that makes your nose wrinkle, in baskets of figs. The fig seller, an older woman with eyes like flint, greets you by name. You've traded with her before. She knows enough about you not to ask too much, but enough to point out a familiar face down the lane. You follow her gaze and spot a man in a fine cloak, browsing the spice stall. Historians debate whether women like you were tolerated openly in marketplaces or expected to operate in the shadows. But the truth on the ground is far more fluid. You've found that a well-timed laugh, an artful question about cinnamon or pepper, can open doors faster than any back-alley arrangement. And the spice stall is a perfect stage, fragrant, colorful, and just exotic enough to make a Roman think of distant pleasures. As you walk, you notice the quieter exchanges happening under the surface. A folded note passed along with a bundle of herbs. A coin slipped into a hand with no words. A glance, sharp and lingering, between two people who then part in opposite directions. The marketplace hums with transactions, but not all of them are about bread or cloth. You pause by a jewelry vendor whose wares glitter in the fading light bronze bracelets, cheap glass beads, and, in a locked box, a few pieces of real gold. You touch one, pretending to consider it, and the vendor leans close, whispering about a senator's mistress who bought one just last week. You file away the name, tucking it into the mental drawer labeled potential leads. The market's end is marked by the animal pens, where goats bleat and chickens cluck in a dusty chorus. You pass them slowly, partly because you enjoy the absurdity of a fat goose eyeing you like a suspicious neighbor, and partly because this is where the crowd thins enough for quieter words. Someone falls into step beside you, a cloth merchant you've spoken to before. His conversation is all about trade routes and ship delays, but his eyes keep flicking toward you. You let the talk wind around to when you might meet again, planting the idea without pressing it. By the time you leave the market, the vendors are packing up. The street feels calmer, the scent of spices lingering in your hair. You carry no obvious purchases, but you've collected something far more valuable: the memory of faces, snippets of conversation, and the faint, satisfying knowledge that you've left a few people thinking about you long after you've disappeared into the crowd. The warm buzz of the market fades behind you, and your feet carry you toward a quieter stretch of street where a different kind of work awaits. This isn't about open stalls or loud banter. This is about the subtle art of finding and keeping regular clients, the ones who don't just drop coins into your palm once and vanish, but return like the phases of the moon. You've learned something over the years. Stability isn't in the windfall, it's in the repeat. That merchant who smells faintly of cedar oil and always buys the good wine. He's worth more than 5 drunken sailors on shore leave. A regular client is like a favorite fountain. You can draw from it again and again, but only if you keep the water clean. Historians still argue whether Roman prostitutes cultivated long-term patron relationships in ways similar to courtesans in later centuries, but the surviving graffiti, tablets, and whispers suggest it was common enough. You've seen the pattern yourself. First, a curious approach, then a few visits, and, if you play your cards right, a sense of familiarity that grows into something closer to ritual. Tonight, your goal isn't to pull in something new, it's to maintain the ties you've already woven. You slip into a dimly lit thermopolium, one of the little eateries that dot the streets. The place smells of lentil stew and hot bread. You know he'll be here. He always is. 3 evenings after a ship comes in, and there he is, leaning over a cup of wine, his eyes bright when they land on you. You don't rush. You order a drink first, letting the moment stretch, like you're not entirely sure you're going to sit with him at all. He likes the chase, even when the outcome's certain. When you finally take the stool beside him, it's with a smile that says, "I'm here because I want to be, not because you're working." That's the trick with regulars. Make them feel like they've chosen you, but also like you've chosen them right back. Over the steam of the stew, you swap news, his about trade disputes in Ostia, yours about the latest games in the amphitheater. You drop in a little teasing, a little genuine interest, weaving the conversation into something that feels like friendship. You remember his sister's name, his favorite figs from a particular orchard, the way he hates the smell of goat cheese. These are not grand gestures, they're the small stitches in the cloth of connection. Every so often, you throw in something unexpected. Tonight, you slide a small sprig of rosemary across the table, wrapped in a scrap of linen. For your headaches, you say, watching the faint surprise turn into warmth. It's not expensive, but it's personal. And personal is the kind of currency that makes a man think twice before looking elsewhere. The quirky part of cultivating regulars is how often the relationship stretches beyond the obvious. Sometimes they ask for help finding a gift, writing a letter, even passing a message discreetly. You've helped him negotiate the purchase of a better wool cloak, haggling like it was for yourself. In return, he's been known to slip extra coins into your hand without fanfare, the kind of generosity that's as much about trust as it is about affection. But there's a balance. Too much familiarity, and you risk being taken for granted. Too little, and they start to drift. So you keep a tiny edge of unpredictability. Be warm, but not always available. Laugh easily, but keep your deeper thoughts just out of reach. Like a well-crafted amphora, you're beautiful, useful, and slightly mysterious. Later, you leave the thermopolium together, his hand resting lightly at your elbow as you navigate the cobblestones. You talk about the upcoming festival, about the wine harvest, about nothing in particular. The streets are busy enough that your presence together doesn't stand out. In the distance, the glow of oil lamps pools on the ground like molten gold. Historians debate whether such arrangements offered women any real security, or if they were just softer forms of dependency. For you, it's a dance of balance between earning enough to stay afloat and avoiding the trap of letting one person's favor dictate your fate. You've seen others fall into that hole, relying on a single client's goodwill until it dries up like an empty cistern. Back at your room, the evening feels unhurried. He lingers, talking about ships and storms, about the strange birds that follow the galleys on long voyages. You let him paint the pictures in your mind-white wings against a deep blue sea, the splash of silver fish. The night doesn't have to end in the way others might expect. Sometimes it ends with conversation and a shared loaf of bread. When he finally leaves, there's a familiar heaviness in the purse he's left on the table. You check it quickly enough to cover your rent for a week, and then some. But more than the coins, you value the fact that you'll see him again. Not tomorrow, not the next day, but soon enough to keep the thread between you from fraying. Before sleep, you make a mental list of your other regulars: the baker who visits on Thursdays, the widow's son who comes after market day, the soldier who sends word ahead from the camp. Each one different, each one needing a slightly different version of you. And you'll give it because this is the long game, and in Rome, the long game is what keeps you standing when others fade into the dust of the street. The Lupenna door creaks open with that familiar rasp, and the first breath you take inside is thick with the layered scents of wine, lamp oil, and the faint tang of perfume that's been lingering in the plaster for years. This place isn't a secret. Everyone in Pompeii knows where it is. And in Rome, the larger ones have their own distinct reputation. You step into the narrow entry hall, the stone cool under your sandals, and the soundscape washes over you. Soft laughter from one room, a sharp burst of bargaining from another, the muffled slap of leather sandals on the worn floor. The Lupenna is both workplace and stage. Every archway holds a scene, some loud and boisterous, others quiet and almost tender. The walls here aren't plain. They're splashed with frescoes that leave little to the imagination, a kind of menu for the curious. Historians still argue whether the images were meant for instruction, enticement, or just decoration, but you've seen clients use them like pointing at a dish they want for supper. The building is organized like a hive. Small rooms with heavy curtains for privacy line both sides of a central hall. Each cubiculum has its own oil lamp, a narrow bed built into the wall, and often a little shelf for personal trinkets. You've decorated yours with a scrap of dyed wool, a tiny bronze figurine, and the rosemary sprig your regular gave you last week. These small touches make the cold plaster feel more like a place you belong to, not just a cell you work in. Your day here starts before the lamps are even lit. You and the others sweep the floors, set out fresh straw for bedding, and check the lamps' wicks. The older women, those who've seen decades of this trade, know exactly how to pace the day. There's no rush in the morning. That's when the workers are busy in the markets or at the docks. Midday brings in the gamblers, the idle, and the curious travelers. Evening, though, that's when the lupanar hums. There's a rhythm to it all. You greet clients with the same practiced warmth, though not without the occasional joke to keep things from feeling too mechanical. One man comes in smelling so strongly of garum that you tease him about being able to sell himself to the fishmongers. He laughs, and the tension breaks. Quirky moments like this don't just entertain, they set you apart in a space where everyone is selling the same general service. Between visitors, you sit in the main hall with the others, passing a clay cup of watered wine. Conversations range from gossip about a senator's mistress to complaints about the price of olive oil. In these quiet interludes, you notice the constant background sounds, the scratch of stylus on wax as the owner keeps his accounts, the soft padding of a slave delivering warm water, the whisper of a curtain being drawn. It's like living inside a machine where every gear is a person with their own role. The owner, of course, keeps watch over all. He's not unkind, but his eyes are sharp, and every coin is counted twice. Some lupanars are run by women retired workers who know the game inside and out, but here, the man who owns the place sees it as just another branch of his investments, like his vineyard outside the city. You've learned not to expect much from him except efficiency. There's also a strange safety here compared to the streets. Within these walls, you're less likely to be harassed without payment, and the regular flow of people keeps the truly dangerous types wary. But safety comes with trade-offs. A cut of every fee goes to the house, and you can't refuse work without a good reason. Historians still debate whether brothel work in Rome offered better living conditions than street work. But for you, it's at least a place where the rain doesn't soak your bedding. One of the quirks of this lupanar is the coded knocks on the door to slow taps for a regular client, 3 quick for someone new. It's not exactly a secret system, but it gives the workers a moment to compose themselves before facing whoever's coming in. You've learned to listen for other signs, too, the weight of the footsteps, the tone of voice when they first greet the owner. Those little tells let you gauge whether you'll be smiling for the next half hour or gritting your teeth. As the evening deepens, the place takes on a glow. Lamps are lit in every room, their flames flickering against the painted walls. The air gets warmer, heavier, and the murmurs from behind the curtains turn into a layered hum. Sometimes it's almost hypnotic. You could close your eyes and imagine it as the sound of a distant market or the surf hitting the shore. In the corner, one of the women strums a small lyre between clients. The tune drifts lazily through the hall, mingling with the smell of spiced wine. She says it makes the men linger longer, spend more. You believe her. Anything that slows them down here usually speeds up the coins later. By midnight, the flow slows. You see the same few regulars making their last rounds before heading home, their sandals scuffing the floor like tired punctuation marks. You help snuff a few of the lamps, the smoke curling up into the rafters. The place feels different, now quieter, almost tender in its own way. You pass through the central hall one last time, brushing your fingers against the cool stone, knowing that in a few hours you'll be right back here, curtains drawn, lamps lit, and the hum starting all over again. You wake late, blinking at the strip of daylight that cuts across your room from the high, narrow window. Your back is still a little sore from the thin straw mattress, but you've learned to stretch before your feet even hit the floor. The lupanar might have been your stage last night, but the streets are your theater today. Stepping outside, the first thing that hits you is the sound vendors calling out the morning's deals, the rhythmic slap of sandals on stone, and somewhere far off, the metallic clang of a blacksmith's hammer. The air is a jumble of scents: fresh bread from a nearby stall, briny fish from the docks, and the faint whiff of donkey dung that no amount of street sweeping ever really fixes. You wrap your shawl a little tighter and fall into the current of people flowing toward the market. This isn't just shopping, it's networking. You might be buying figs, but you're also gathering whispers. Which merchant just came into port? Which soldier got paid? Which senator's nephew is in town and ripe for a night of tourist prices? Historians still argue whether Roman prostitutes actively cultivated clients in public spaces or relied mostly on word of mouth. But here, it's clear that being seen is half the job. At the fruit stall, you pick through plump purple grapes, their skins cool and slightly dusty from the morning air. The vendor greets you by name. He's seen you here often enough and slips you an extra handful without charging. You give him a grin and a conspiratorial wink. Favors are a currency, too, and a free handful of grapes today might be repaid in a whispered tip about a wealthy visitor tomorrow. A few stalls down, you linger near the spice merchant. The warm scent of cinnamon and pepper fills your nose as you pretend to browse. In reality, you're watching the crowd. A man in a deep-dyed tunic pauses to smell a jar of saffron. His rings glint in the sun, and the leather of his sandals is too fine for a common laborer. You catch his eye briefly, not too long, just enough to plant a seed. This is the subtle dance of the street, offering a glance, a hint, a question in the arch of an eyebrow without saying a word. Sometimes, your day in the market isn't about clients at all. It's about finding little luxuries for yourself. A strip of bright cloth to brighten your cubiculum, a jar of rose water for your hair, or a sprig of mint to chew on when the wine you reserved at work is closer to vinegar. These purchases remind you that you're more than the job. You're a person with tastes, comfort, and a sense of style that's entirely your own. On your way back toward the lupanar, you pass by the baths. The steam curls out from the entrance like a beckoning finger. Public baths are one of Rome's great equalizers. Here, slaves, merchants, and senators share the same pools, even if they don't exactly mingle. You stop in, paying the modest entry fee, and make your way to the tepidarium. The warm air hits your skin like an embrace, easing the knots from your shoulders. As you soak, you overhear fragments of conversation drifting across the water. One man boasts about a dice game he nearly won. Another complains about grain shortages, and a third mutters something about a temple scandal. Every word is potential leverage. Every rumor can be spun into a story for the right listener later. You file the juiciest tidbits away in your mind, careful to keep your face serene. The baths also serve another purpose. They keep you looking and feeling your best. Smooth skin, clean hair, and a rested demeanor are part of the presentation. A client might forgive a frayed tunic, but he's less likely to return if you look worn and unkempt. Quirky detail. Some women here swear by rubbing their skin with fine sand before oiling it as their ancient version of exfoliation. You tried it once and nearly scratched yourself raw. By late afternoon, you're weaving back through the streets toward the lupanar. The sun has shifted, throwing longer shadows across the paving stones. You stop by a baker's stall for a round loaf, still warm from the oven, tucking it under your arm. Bread, fruit, and maybe a little cheese from the dairy cellar will make up your dinner before the evening rush begins again. On the last stretch before home, you spot two fellow workers leaning in the doorway of a wine shop. They're laughing with a soldier, his helmet tipped back and a half-empty cup in his hand. One of them waves you over, but you shake your head. You've still got things to stash in your room. You know you'll see them later, probably with that same soldier in tow, if he hasn't drunk himself into a nap first. Back in your cubiculum, you arrange your purchases. Grapes in a small clay dish, bread wrapped in cloth, and the bit of bright fabric draped across the edge of your bed. The room feels a little warmer, a little more yours. Outside, the evening noises are starting to rise, the distant hum of voices, the occasional clatter of hooves on stone, the faint, melodic call of a lyre from somewhere you can't quite place. You take a slow breath, savoring the calm before the next round begins. The market may have been busy, but here you have a few precious moments of stillness. You chew on a grape, its skin bursting tart and sweet in your mouth, and think about tomorrow. Maybe you'll linger longer at the spice stall. Maybe you'll try the sand scrub again, but more gently. Or maybe you'll just walk the streets, letting the city unfold around you, always watching, always listening. By the time you step outside again, the sky is caught in that in-between hour golden light, stretching long shadows across the cobblestones, the air cooling just enough to invite people back into the streets. The day's dust hangs in the glow, softening edges and making the city look almost kind, almost tonight. You're not heading straight to the lupanar. You're making a detour to the tabernae venerea, the wine shops. These are where the lines blur between socializing and business, between pleasure and performance. A wine shop in Rome isn't the candlelit sophistication you might imagine. It's more like a noisy living room that belongs to the entire neighborhood. The benches are worn, the walls painted with scenes that range from heroic myths to, let's say, suggestive interpretations of them. As you step inside, the warmth and scent of cheap wine hit you in the face. It's not unpleasant. There's resin in the air, and a tang that reminds you of vinegar. But there's also laughter, lute music from the corner, and that sense of something about to happen. A man near the counter slaps his friend S back so hard the wine sloshes over the rim of their cups. You slide into the scene like you've always belonged here, offering a nod to the shopkeeper, who knows enough to keep your cup full without asking questions. Here's the thing about wine shops. They're both neutral ground and hunting grounds. Everyone comes here: sailors, merchants, retired soldiers, and the occasional bored patrician slumming it for a thrill. Historians still argue whether Roman brothels were sometimes disguised as wine shops, or if wine shops simply served as convenient meeting spots. But either way, the overlap is strong enough that regulars know the code. You take a seat on a low bench near the back, not to hide, but to observe. The door swings open every few minutes, letting in the scent of the evening air, the clatter of street sounds. A group of young men tumble in, still flushed from a day's work, their tunics wrinkled and their talk loud. They order a jug and start throwing dice on the table, each roll punctuated with groans or cheers. You catch one of them glancing your way, and you let the look linger just long enough to plant the idea that maybe you not here just for the wine. The owner's daughter passes by with a tray, refilling cups and smiling shyly. You notice she lingers near the wealthier customers, the ones with better sandals and cleaner nails. She's learned the same lesson you have: positioning matters. Wine shops also serve another function there, a listening post. Here you can pick up more gossip than in any market. At the table to your left, a man is talking about the latest chariot race, claiming the greens were robbed by a bad call. At the counter, two sailors mutter about a shipment that mysteriously fell off the manifest in Ostia. You tuck the details away, because you never know when such trivia might entertain or impress someone later. Halfway through your cup, you feel a shift in the air. The lute player switches to a slower tune, the dice players quiet down just a fraction, and a familiar figure slides onto the bench opposite you. He's an older man with a merchant's hand, soft but sunspotted, dressed in a tunic dyed a deep, expensive blue. He leans in, voice low but steady. You've shared drinks before, traded stories about far-off ports and strange cargo. You both know where this could lead, but you keep it light for now. Stories about the market, jokes about the cook at your favorite food stall, quirky tidbit. Some Roman wine was deliberately thickened with boiled must or flavored with herbs, like wormwood, which gave it a bitter edge. Tonight's isn't quite that adventurous, but it does have a hint of pine resin that clings to your tongue. You swirl it idly, letting the conversation roll at an easy pace. Eventually, you rise, offering a parting smile that could mean anything. This isn't about closing a deal every night. It's about weaving yourself into the fabric of the city, so that when someone thinks good company, your face comes to mind. Back on the street, the noise of the wine shop fades behind you. The lamps are being lit, small terracotta oil lamps in shop doorways, brighter torches in wealthier districts. The flicker of light on the paving stones makes the street feel alive, almost breathing. You pass by a bakery still open for evening bread, the air heavy with the scent of honey cakes. You buy one on a whim, its surface sticky with glaze. The sweetness is a sharp contrast to the sour wine still on your tongue. The last stop before heading to work is the public fountain. You rinse your hands, letting the cool water run over your fingers, and take a long drink. A group of children dart past, splashing each other and laughing, their joy cutting through the tired hum of the city. For a moment, you just watch them, the sound a reminder that not everything in Rome is transaction and calculation. By the time you reach the Lupanar, the night is fully awake. Lanterns burn in the entryway, casting warm light on the carved graffiti that customers have been adding for years. Crude drawings, names, declarations of best night of my life. You run a hand lightly over one etching of a small boat, wondering what story lies behind it. Inside, the air is thicker, warmer, and carries the faint perfume of oil lamps mixed with human closeness. You step back into the current of the evening, carrying with you the warmth of the wine shop, the snippets of gossip, and the satisfaction of knowing that you, VE, tended both sides of your work, the public face and the private game. By the time you settle into your usual corner, the rhythm of the lupanar is in full swing. The air hums with overlapping voices, flirtation, negotiation, laughter that may or may not be genuine. The soft flicker of the oil lamps casts long shadows that sway with each movement, turning familiar faces into shifting silhouettes. Tonight isn't about meeting new clients. It's about tending to the ones you already have, the regulars. In Rome, that word doesn't just mean a customer. It means someone who thinks of you when they think of pleasure, companionship, or maybe just a certain kind of conversation. You don't need to chase them, they come to you, and that changes the dynamic entirely. One of them arrives just as you're adjusting the folds of your He's a middle-aged man with the faint stoop of someone who spends more time at a desk than in the fields. You know his habits: 2 cups of watered wine, a small plate of olives, and a story about how everything in the city is going downhill, usually because of the younger generation. Tonight, you listen with an attentive smile, nodding at the right moments, even teasing him gently when his rant strays into the absurd, mainstream historical fact. Regulars were the lifeblood of many Roman prostitutes. With competition fierce and the streets full of alternatives, building loyalty was as important as the service itself. Some even kept records of preferred food, conversation topics, and payment methods, something akin to an ancient client profile. As he talks, you pour wine from a jug kept in the corner. It's a thin vintage, clearly stretched with water, but it doesn't matter. The act of pouring of offering reinforces the sense that he's being looked after. That's the key with regulars, making them feel they're not just another transaction, even if, deep down, you both know they are. Across the room, another familiar face catches your eye. This one is younger, a soldier on leave. His tunic is cleaner than last time, the purse at his belt a little heavier. You know he's just been paid. When he approaches, you give him a smile that's warm but not greedy. It's all about balance. Soldiers like him want to spend freely, but they also want to believe you value their company as much as their coin. Quirky tidbit: some Roman brothels offered loyalty perks. In subtle ways, a favorite seat, a slightly better jug of wine, even a private corner with softer cushions. It wasn't about luxury so much as familiarity, a way to keep someone feeling like they belonged. The soldier talks about his time stationed near the Rhine, painting pictures of cold mornings, thick cloaks, and strange northern food. You don't interrupt, letting the rhythm of his story fill the space between you. Every so often, you ask a question that keeps him going. What did the river look like in winter? Or did the locals trade willingly? Because you know he likes to feel like an explorer, bringing back tales from the edge of the empire. Historians still argue whether these deeper conversations actually built lasting loyalty, or if it was purely the physical side that mattered. You know better, it's both. A good listener can earn repeat business just as surely as a good lover. Hours slip by, marked only by the gradual dimming of lamps as the oil burns down. Between clients, you take a moment to sit near the entrance, watching the street outside. The air is cooler now, with the faint smell of damp stone. Somewhere nearby, a group of street musicians is playing a soft tune, the notes carried on the breeze. One last regular arrives just before the doors close for the night, a merchant whose laugh is louder than the street traffic. He greets you with a familiarity that borders on theatrics, but you play along. He's the kind who likes to be seen, to feel as though his presence changes the entire room. You guide him to his usual spot, bring him the bread and cheese he always orders, and let him launch into his latest business triumph. You've heard versions of this story before, but that's part of the job, making each telling feel fresh. Sometimes you ask questions you already know the answers to, just to let him shine a little brighter. He leaves you with a generous tip, as always, and a promise to return before the month is out. When the last client is gone, you help extinguish the lamps, the sudden darkness making the air feel cooler. The room smells faintly of wine, sweat, and lamp oil. You gather your things slowly, savoring the quiet after hours of constant voices. Stepping outside, you find the streets are nearly empty. A lone torch burns at the end of the road, its light flickering across the worn stones. Somewhere far off, a dog barks once, then falls silent. You start walking, your footsteps echoing softly. You're tired, but it's the good kind of tired, the kind that comes from knowing you've done exactly what you needed to do to keep the connections that matter most in your line of work. The city feels calmer now, the chaos of the day tucked away for a few precious hours, and as you make your way home, carry with you the quiet satisfaction of a night well managed. Morning comes earlier than you'd like, slipping through the cracks in the shutters in thin bands of gold. Your room still smells faintly of last night's oil lamps, and the low hum of the waking city seeps in from the street below, vendors calling, wheels creaking, the chatter of neighbors swapping gossip before the day truly begins. On the small wooden table beside your bed, there's a little collection of objects. At first glance, it could be mistaken for clutter bits of ribbon, a bronze coin with a dent, a small carved bone charm, even a scrap of faded purple cloth. But each one has a story, a face attached to it. These are the gifts and tokens your clients leave behind, sometimes on purpose, sometimes by accident, and sometimes because they think it buys them a deeper place in your memory. You pick up the coin first. It's not worth much, barely enough to buy a crust of bread, but the dent gives it away. It's from the soldier who came back from the Rhine. He'd pressed it into your palm after a night of telling stories, saying it was lucky. Maybe it is, though you've yet to see it change your fortunes. Still, you keep it. Mainstream historical fact. In ancient Rome, prostitutes often accepted payment in coin, but clients sometimes supplemented with gifts, perfume, trinkets, or even food. This wasn't always generosity. Sometimes it was a way to disguise the transaction or create a sense of ongoing intimacy. Next, you lift the bone charm. It's smooth from being handled, a little figure of a bird. The merchant with the loud laugh brought it after a trip to Ostia, saying it was carved by a sailor for good luck on voyages. He claimed he wanted you to have safe travels, though you rarely go farther than the Suburra. Still, it's a kind gesture or a clever ploy to keep you thinking of him. You run your fingers over the scrap of purple cloth. That one came from a senator's aide who tore it from the inside of his cloak to wrap around a cup of figs he bought for you. It smells faintly of expensive perfume, though the edges have frayed. Purple, of course, is a color reserved for the wealthy, dyed with the costly murex snail. To someone like you, it's more than fabric. It's a reminder that your life brushes up against circles you could never otherwise enter. Quirky tidbit: some Roman women in the trade collected unusual gifts, not just for sentiment, but as conversation pieces for future clients, an ancient form of marketing. A strange trinket on display could spark a story, and a story could lead to business. Sometimes the gifts are more practical: a loaf of bread wrapped in fig leaves, a small jar of olive oil, or even a bit of wool to mend clothing. These you use quickly, there's no point in keeping them, but the tokens, the odd little keepsakes, those linger. They give your room a sense of life beyond the constant shuffle of bodies and coin. Historians still argue whether such tokens were genuine acts of affection or calculated moves in a transactional world. You've seen both. Sometimes a gift is heartfelt, a little piece of a client's world offered without expectation. Other times, it's just another tool, something to make you feel indebted, to keep you from charging the full rate next time. Late morning, you step out into the bustling street, a ribbon from your small collection now tied around your wrist. It's not the fanciest thing you own, but it adds a touch of color against your skin. People notice these small details, especially the men who know what they once gave you and can see you still wearing it. That recognition is a thread they can tug on to pull themselves back into your orbit. At the market, you pass stalls selling tiny perfume bottles and glass beads. You pause, running your fingers over a string of blue beads from Alexandria. Too expensive for now, but you file them away in your mind. A gift like that could become a talking point, or if given by the right man, something you could later trade. By midday, you're back in the lupanar. The madam keeps a little shelf in the corner for display items, tokens too flashy or strange not to show off. Today, a silver hairpin carved in the shape of a dolphin catches your eye. No one remembers exactly who left it. It's just there, a piece of someone's history now folded into the collective space. You wonder if the woman who received it still thinks of it, or if she traded it for bread weeks ago. Later, a new client arrives, clearly nervous. You soften your voice, gesture toward the cushions, and notice his eyes drifting toward the ribbon on your wrist. From a friend, you say casually, and you watch the thought spark in his mind that maybe, one day, he could be the one to give you something you'd wear in plain sight. That's the thing about tokens. They're never just objects. They're placeholders for memory, for the stories people tell themselves about their place in your life. And in a city as crowded and forgetful as Rome, a small, tangible reminder can mean more than the most elaborate words. By nightfall, the ribbon is still on your wrist, though now it's faintly scented with the wine and smoke of the evening's business. When you finally untie it and lay it on the table beside the dented coin and the bird charm, you feel a little swell of something that isn't quite sentiment, but isn't cynicism either. Maybe these gifts are just tools. Maybe they're just crumbs tossed from richer tables, but they're yours. And in a world where so much is temporary, even the smallest things can anchor you. The air in the Subura feels different at dawn, cooler and sharper, as though the city hasn't quite remembered all the trouble it's supposed to get up to. You slip through the narrow streets toward the river, where the fog hangs low over the Tiber, curling like lazy smoke around the moored boats. This is your escape route, your tiny rebellion, leaving the confines of the lupanar before the rest of the day lays its claim on you. Along the banks, you see the early risers, dock workers hauling cargo, fishermen with nets slung over their shoulders, washerwomen beating clothes against smooth stones. The smell is an odd mixture: wet rope, fish, and the sour temps of river mud. But it's here you've learned one of your favorite survival tricks. Information flows faster than water. You sit near a cluster of women who scrub garments for the nearby taverns. They chatter as they work, swapping stories of drunken brawls, stingy customers, and merchants who can't keep their hands to themselves. One of them glances at you and smirks, knowing your work isn't so different. They ask no questions. Everyone here understands the value of discretion. Mainstream historical fact: the Tiber's banks were a major hub of commerce, gossip, and illicit deals in Rome. People from every class crossed paths here, making it a fertile ground for anyone looking to gather useful tidbits. You overhear a fisherman grumbling about a senator's nephew who gambled away more than he could pay back. Your mind immediately starts turning over the possibilities. Men with problems are men who might need distractions. Later, you might casually mention to a friend in the Lupana that this young man is in debt. Sometimes, just knowing who's desperate can bring business to your door. Quirky tidbit: certain Roman prostitutes, especially those with ambitions beyond the trade, doubled as informal spies, trading information between merchants, politicians, and even rival brothels. A scrap of gossip could be worth more than a month's earnings if delivered to the right ear. By mid-morning, you're winding your way back through the market streets, the fog now burned off by the sun. You pause to buy a fig from a fruit seller, tossing her one of your smaller coins. She slips you a piece of news. Along with the fruiton official is moving through the Suburra today with his entourage, inspecting buildings for safety. You laugh quietly. In Rome, safety inspections often mean bribes. Historians still argue whether women in your profession were actively sought out for political information, or if their involvement was more opportunistic. From where you sit, it's both. Sometimes powerful men deliberately loosen their tongues in your company. Other times, you simply happen to be the one holding the wine cup when the truth spills out. Back in the Lupana, the madam is in a foul mood. She's heard a rumor about a rival house offering cheaper rates and extras to lure away customers. She sends you to look into it, a polite way of saying, "Go spy." You change into something modest, tie up your hair, and head across the district. The rival place is easy to spot: freshly painted shutters, a new sign with a carved dolphin, and a faint whiff of imported perfume. You wander in, pretending to be looking for work, and let the other women chatter. You learn they've struck a deal with a wine merchant for better prices, and are offering free cups with every visit. Clever. You file the detail away. By the time you return, the sun is sliding toward late afternoon. You pass the gossip to the madam, who nods grimly. She'll need to match the offer or find a different hook. That's the thing about this trade. You're not just selling yourself. You're part of a constant, shifting game of business strategy. Later, while preparing your space for the evening, you think about all the invisible threads of connection running through your life. The dock worker who tells you which ships have come in, the washerwoman who notes which tavern is closing early, the merchant who brags too loudly about his next deal. It's like you're standing at the center of a web, every strand humming with small vibrations of change. One client tonight is a merchant from the East, eager to talk more than touch. He speaks of tariffs, grain shortages, and the mood in the Senate. Most of it would bore someone else, but you listen closely. You know a tavern keeper who likes to gamble on grain prices. This could be valuable. When the night winds down and you're finally alone, you pull out a scrap of parchment from under the bed. It's not a diary too risky, but a list. Just names, places, and odd little notes only you understand. SN debts, Dolphin House, free wine, grain up soon. To anyone else, it's nonsense. To you, it's a map of opportunity. The city sleeps, but you know it never truly rests. Somewhere out there, in the shadowy corners of Rome, another piece of information is waiting to be overheard, another thread to weave into your survival. By the time the sun creeps over the rooftops again, you've already decided today won't follow the usual rhythm. You're restless, itching for a change of scenery, so you set your sights on the Circus Maximus. Not for the races they not scheduled until later in the week, but because the place is alive with merchants, craftsmen, and wanderers setting up for future crowds. The scent of trampled grass mixes with the warm sweetness of honey cakes frying nearby, and the low murmur of bargaining drifts through the morning air. You stroll past stalls, selling everything from bronze oil lamps to amulets carved with images of Venus. One man offers you a tiny bottle of imported cinnamon oil, swearing it will ignite any man's passions instantly. You raise an eyebrow. His pitch is almost as bold as yours on a good night, but you hand over a coin anyway. You know clients who'd pay handsomely for a little theatrical touch. Mainstream historical fact: the Circus Maximus wasn't just a racetrack. It doubled as a massive public gathering place, attracting peddlers, performers, gamblers, and the curious from every corner of the empire. This made it a social hotspot, perfect for your unofficial networking. You linger near a group of traveling performers, practicing their routines, flacrobats flipping effortlessly through the air, a juggler tossing knives that catch the sunlight in quick flashes. A tall woman in a flowing blue tunic approaches you. She's not from Rome. Her accent hints at Alexandrian. She wastes no time making her purpose clear. She needs introductions to certain kinds of patrons, the wealthy sort with a taste for the exotic. You smile. Networking is a two-way street. She'll owe you a favor. Quirky tidbit: some Roman prostitutes maintained professional ties with entertainers, actors, and musicians, blending their circles so each could pull in clients from the other's audiences. It was an early form of cross-promotion, though with more eyeliner and fewer contracts. As you wander, a young man sidles up to you, clearly nervous. He blurts out an invitation to a private dice game that evening, just for friends, and swears there's no risk, though he says it in the exact tone that guarantees there's plenty. You keep your expression neutral. A dice game means wealthy men trying to outdo each other with bravado, which often spills into hiring company afterward. You make a mental note to arrive fashionably late. Historians still argue whether women like you actively sought out such events as part of a deliberate strategy, or simply stumbled into them by living in Rome's busiest districts. In your experience, it's both. Sometimes opportunity knocks, sometimes it shoves its way in and sits down uninvited. By midday, you head toward the baths, not to bathe yet, but to hover just outside the entrance, where men leave their attendants and possessions. The hum of conversation here is constant. Senators chat with generals, traders gossip about the latest shipment delays, and everyone complains about taxes. You pretend to admire a display of polished strigils at a nearby vendor while catching pieces of dialogue. One snippet makes your ears prick. A merchant, muttering about a shipment of Syrian glass arriving under the table, to dodge customs fees. That's a delicate piece of information. A rival merchant might pay you just to know their competition's playing dirty. You don't move on it yet, but it's stored away with the others in your mental ledger. In the late afternoon, you swing by the dice game you were invited to, hosted in a dimly lit back room of a wine shop. The air smells of roasted nuts, sweat, and the sharp temps of spilled wine. Men are already hunched over the table, coins clinking, dice clattering. You glide in, letting them notice you in their own time. Soon enough, one of them, a broad-shouldered man with a flushed face, since you sit beside him for luck, you oblige, and he promptly wins his next throw. He laughs, calls you his good charm, and orders more wine. These games are dangerous in their own weight. Pampers flare, debts pile up, and more than one player here probably owes favors to men you'd rather not meet in a dark alley. But for now, it's harmless enough, and you make a few promises for later that will likely turn into actual work before the week is out. Night falls, and you find yourself back in the Lupanger cinnamon oil tucked safely in your chest. A couple of new names added to your mental network, and a promise from the Alexandrian performer to introduce you to her troupe tomorrow. You sit by the window for a while, watching the flicker of lamplight along the street. Rome hums with energy different from the raw noise of the Subura, softer but no less alive. Somewhere out there, the merchant with the smuggled glass is finishing his dinner. The dice players are counting their remaining coins, and the woman in blue is preparing for her performance. You can't be in all these places at once, but your influence is like a shadow stretching over them, invisible but present. Before you sleep, you dab a drop of cinnamon oil on your wrist. It's sweet, warm, almost intoxicating. You smile to yourself. Tomorrow, you'll put it to the test. The next morning drapes itself over the city in a pale gold light, the kind that makes the marble temples look freshly polished. You roll out of your bed, more of a creaky cot, but you've learned to sell the illusion, and you're already thinking about the Alexandrian performer's promised introduction. Not because you expect a flurry of wealthy patrons to fall at your feet immediately, but because these troupe gatherings are where whispers turn into gold. You wind your way toward the Forum Boreum, where the troupe is rehearsing near the old cattle market. The smell is, well, it's a cattle market. It hits you before you even turn the corner. Still, you're met with a lively scene. Musicians plucking at lyres, dancers stretching their legs, and a man balancing 3 pottery jugs on his head as if it's nothing. The woman in blue spots you, waves, and beckons you over. Mainstream historical fact. The Forum Boreum wasn't just for trading animals. It was a commercial hub near the Tiber, full of warehouses, shrines, and a constant churn of goods and people. For someone like you, it's another net to cast into the stream of opportunity. She introduces you to her leader, a wiry man with an angular face and an oddly formal bow. His Latin is tinged with Egyptian vowels, and his handshake lingers just enough for you to know he is appraising you as much as you reappraising him. The troupe has a performance booked for a private villa in a few days, he says. And wouldn't it be nice to have someone who could smooth conversations with certain guests afterward? You smile. It's not an offer, it's an opening. While the dancers practice nearby, you listen to gossip about villa owners who's been too generous at recent banquets, and which senators' wives have suspiciously extravagant jewelry for their husbands' modest incomes. Quirky tidbit. Some wealthy Romans actually hired actors, dancers, and courtesans, not for entertainment itself, but to make their parties look culturally sophisticated and ancient form of status. You're not sure whether to laugh or admire the cleverness. By mid-morning, you slip away, heading toward the river. Barges are unloading crates, and longshoremen shout over the creak of wood and slap of water. You pause near a crew struggling with a crate stamped with Greek letters. A dockhand mutters that it's another of those glass shipments. Your ears prick. It's the same merchant from yesterday's overheard conversation. The temptation to follow this lead tugs at you. Historians still argue whether prostitutes truly doubled as spies or informants in an organized sense. But in your world, it's just common sense. If knowledge is power, you collect it like other people collect coins. You follow at a safe distance as the crate is rolled onto a cart. It heads toward a storage building, guarded by a man with the posture of someone who's fought in more than one brawl. You don't get closer, there's no rush. This is a slow brewing pot. You'll let it simmer. The afternoon draws you back toward the Subura, but you make a stop at a small perfumery along the way. Inside, rows of clay flasks line the shelves, each with a wax seal and a faint painted symbol. You trade a few coins for a vial of myrrh, oil deep, smoky, mysterious sand. A pinch of saffron too, mix into wine for special occasions. The shopkeeper slips you an extra pinch, for luck, though you suspect he's just hoping you mention his shop to your more lavishly spending clients. By the time the sun angles low, you're weaving through the Subura's crowded lanes, heading for the dice player's haunt from yesterday. Tonight's game is louder, more heated. Coins are stacked higher, the wine flows faster, and the man who called you his lucky charm greets you like a talisman. You lean in, offering a quiet comment about his opponent's talon, almost imperceptible twitch before he throws the dice. The man laughs, throws big, and wins again. He rewards you not with coins, but with an invitation to a dinner at his friend S. Domus tomorrow, where all the right people will be. You know the kind of evening this will be. Half politics, half wine-soaked boasting, an entirely fertile ground for someone in your profession. Night wraps around Rome like a warm cloak, and you find yourself drifting back toward the Lupanar. On the way, you pass a street performer, just a boy, balancing on one hand atop a short column. He catches your eye and grins before flipping down to grab a tossed coin. For a moment, you think of the performers at the Forum Boreum, the cinnamon oil waiting in your chest, and the glass merchant's guarded warehouse. All these threads weaving together, sometimes without you even tugging. Before sleep, you dab the myrrh oil along your collarbone. The scent is rich, almost resinous, wrapping around you like smoke. Tomorrow will bring its own theater, some of it staged, some of it entirely unplanned. Either way, you'll be ready, because in this city, the line between performer and spectator is as thin as gold leaf on a banquet platter. The invitation to the dinner lingers in your mind the next morning, like the aftertaste of a strong Falernian wine, heady, promising, and a little dangerous if you're not careful. You rise slowly, stretching out the stiffness in your back, and reach for the vial of saffron you bought yesterday. A single pinch into your morning watered wine, not enough to dull your senses, but enough to sharpen the edges of the day. Outside, the air is crisp and carries that faint scent of bread from the nearby Pistrina. You stop to buy a small loaf, tearing it as you walk toward the dressmaker in the Subura, who owes you a favor. She's a wiry woman with clever fingers hunched over a bolt of imported cloth. When you tell her about the dinner, she glances up with a sly smirk and disappears into the back, emerging with a deep green stola edged in gold thread. It's from a client who never paid, she says. If you're careful with it, I'll consider the debt settled. Mainstream historical fact. Roman clothing dyes were expensive, especially greens and purples, which required rare plant-based pigments or combinations of blue and yellow dyes. Wearing them signaled wealth or the ability to fake it convincingly. You hold the fabric up, the green, rich, and dark enough to make even an oil lamp's flicker look flattering. The rest of the morning is spent in small, deliberate errands, visiting the perfumery again for a drop of rose essence to blend with the myrrh, stopping at the jeweler's to rent a pair of gold earrings shaped like laurel leaves. Quirky tidbit. Many working women in Rome borrowed luxury items for an evening, returning them the next day, and if anything went missing, well, that was a problem for another conversation entirely. By midday, you're back in your room, rehearsing your role for tonight, not just how you'll speak, but when you'll listen. Historians still argue whether women in your profession could significantly influence politics, but you know that influence comes less from grand speeches and more from planting the right seed in the right ear at the right time. Late afternoon drapes itself across the rooftops, and you make your way toward the Esquiline, where the dinner will be held. The domus is modest for a senator's associate, but the facade is freshly whitewashed, and the bronze door handle gleams. Inside, the atrium is filled with the low murmur of early arrivals, the slap of sandals on marble, the faint pluck of a lyre. A slave offers you watered wine, and you take it not to drink, but to keep your hands occupied while you scan the room. The dice player from yesterday beams at you, introducing you to his host, a man with a hawk-like gaze and a voice that cuts through conversation like a knife. You catch the flicker of recognition in his eyes, not because he knows you personally, but because he recognizes your role. He doesn't dismiss you, though. He draws you into a circle where men in fine togas discuss shipping routes, taxes, and who has been seen in whose company. You laugh at the right moments, offer the occasional knowing glance, and never, ever overplay your part. The real currency here, isn't coined s, the ease with which people forget you re-listening. A senator's nephew leans close, whispering something about a shipment delayed in Ostia. Across the room, two women exchange sharp glances over a silver dish of figs. The meal itself is lavish, but calculated pork roasted with honey, bowls of olives, bread warm enough to melt the cheese spread across it. Between courses, the host leads the guests to his small garden, where the lamps cast soft halos over clipped hedges and a fountain shaped like a dolphin. You find yourself beside the hawk-eyed host again, who asks, almost idly, if you've ever been to the warehouses along the Tiber. You answer lightly, mentioning you've passed them often. His smile is slow, almost unreadable. By the time the final course is served dates, stuffed with almonds, the conversation has shifted to lighter matters. A new troupe performing in the Forum, the outrageous price of Syrian glass, the rumor that one of the emperor's favorite charioteers is hiding an injury. You file each scrap away, even if it seems harmless now. When the evening winds down, the dice player insists on escorting you back toward the Subura. The streets are quieter, shadows long and curling. You thank him with a kiss on the cheek, slipping away before the gesture can be mistaken for anything more. Back in your room, you peel off the green stola with care, laying it across your chest as if it's a sleeping cat. The earrings go into a cloth pouch, ready to return tomorrow. The rose and myrrh scent clings to your skin, mixing with the faint tang of wine from the host's garden. As you lie back, you think of the hawk-eyed host's question about the warehouses, of the glass merchant's guarded storage, and of the Alexandrian troops' villa performance. Threads again separate, tangled, but you feel them slowly drawing together. And in Rome, when threads knot, things happen. Morning slides in like a lazy cat, curling across the rooftops and spilling down into the Subura. You wake to the faint shuffle of someone sweeping outside, the rasp of bristles over stone. Your first thought isn't of bread or saffron, or even the earrings you need to return it. Of the hawk-eyed host and that question about the warehouses along the Tiber. You decide not to leave it hanging. After returning the green stola and earrings both accepted, with nods of approval you take the long walk toward the river, passing the fish market, where vendors shout about the freshness of their catch. The scent of salt water and eel coils around you, almost masking the sharper temps of tar from the shipyards. The warehouses rise along the quay like hulking sentinels, their brick walls sun-bleached, their heavy wooden doors scarred from years of cargo being dragged in and out. Mainstream historical fact. Many Roman warehouses, or horia, weren't just for grain. They stored spices, wine, olive oil, marble, even exotic animals awaiting the games. The sheer size of these places could swallow entire neighborhoods. You watch the flow of workers for a while, slaves bent under amphorae, clerks scratching notes onto wax tablets, a pair of guards laughing as they roll dice against the wall. Quirky tidbit. The guards here sometimes used trained geese as watchdogs, their sharp honking carrying far in the night. You spot one now, waddling between crates, as if inspecting the goods. Sliding closer, you pretend to examine a spice merchant's stall. From here, you catch snippets of conversation, complaints about a shipment from Alexandria delayed, mutters about storage fees going up, a whispered reference to keeping it quiet until the next festival. Historians still argue whether Roman commerce was truly as regulated as official inscriptions suggest, or whether bribes and under-the-table deals did most of the real work. Judging by the tone in those voices, you'd bet on the latter. You don't linger too long. Watchers can become the watched quickly in places like this. Instead, you drift back toward the Subura, cutting through the temple of Mercury's marketplace. There, you overhear something that knots the threads even tighter. A glass seller grumbling that his most valuable shipment is locked in one of those Tiber warehouses until the right hands open it. By evening, the city feels heavier, as if the August heat has turned to stone. The Alexandrian troops' performance at the villa still awaits, and part of you wonders if the hawk-eyed host will be there. You decide to goad. It's not just curiosity, it's instinct, the same one that's kept you alive through whispered threats and fleeting fortunes. The villa is lit like a dream, lanterns bobbing along the garden path, the air thick with jasmine and the sweet bite of pomegranate wine. You take a seat near the edge of the small open-air theater, letting the laughter and music wash over you. The actors are sharp, their gestures broad and sly, the jokes sliding between ancient myths and pointed nods at local gossip. Halfway through, you feel a presence at your side. It's him, the hawk-eyed host, his smile softer than before. You found the warehouses, he murmurs, not really asking. You nod once. His gaze flicks toward a man across the garden, a merchant whose rings glint even in the low light. That one's holding the key, he says, but keys change hands when the right persuasion is offered. It's not an invitation, not exactly, but in Rome. The line between invitation and opportunity is thin enough to see through. You file the face away, along with the hint of challenge in the host's tone. When the performance ends, applause rippling through the garden, you slip away before any more conversations can pin you in place. The streets home are hushed except for the occasional burst of laughter from a tavern, the shuffle of a cart's wheel over uneven stones. In your room, you light the smallest oil lamp, watching its flame bend and stretch in the draft. Your mind traces over the past days, the dice game, the glass merchant, the dinner, the warehouses, the troupe, each one a bead on a string, and you've been threading them without even noticing. The city doesn't sleep the way you do. Somewhere in the forum, a cart is unloading amphorae under torchlight. Somewhere in the Subura, another woman is painting her eyelids in preparation for a night's work. Somewhere on the Tiber, a goose honks at a shadow it doesn't trust. And somewhere in all that, your next move waits as much about survival as it is about curiosity. For now, though, you let the lamp burn low, the saffron-scented air thick around you. Tomorrow will come, and with it, another chance to tilt the city ever so slightly in your favor. The edges of the story soften now, like parchment worn smooth from too many hands. You let the noise of Rome fade, the clatter of carts and the calls of vendors dissolving into a slow, steady hum. The air grows cooler, as though the stone walls have finally released the last of the day's heat, and the oil lamp's glow stretches just far enough to catch the curve of a jug, the line of a shadow. You imagine the streets emptying, shutters closing one by one, and 1,000 different stories folding themselves away for the night. The baker's ovens go quiet, the wine cellar's jars stop pouring, and the geese at the Tiber warehouses tuck their heads beneath their wings. Even the hawk-eyed host, wherever he sleeps, must eventually set his thoughts aside. Your breathing slows in time with this imagined stillness. Each inhale feels a little deeper, each exhale a little longer, like the city itself is breathing with you. The sharp scents of saffron and myrrh fade into something softer, warm clay, faint wood smoke, the ghost of jasmine from the villa's garden. In this gentle drift, you're no longer watching or listening, no longer balancing between opportunity and caution. You're simply here, resting, safe for the moment. The beads on the string of your days don't need to be counted tonight. They can wait until morning. Somewhere beyond even your imagination's reach, the Tiber flows on, patient and unhurried. It carries the city's secrets as easily as it carries its trade, winding past temples, markets, and quiet courtyards where a single lamp still burns. Its rhythm is steady, like the pulse you can feel in your fingertips if you press them together. Let that rhythm guide you now, slow, even unbroken. Thoughts grow looser, lighter, like dry leaves stirred by the faintest breeze. The spaces between them widen until they're more air than thought, more calm than memory. The city will still be here when you wake, with its noise and heat and endless, tangled threads. For now, it can carry on without you. You've done enough, listened enough, seen enough for one night. So let the lamp's light fade, let your breath find its own quiet pace. and let the day slip gently into the background, until all that's left is the stillness waiting to meet you on the other side of sleep. End of script. Sweet dreams.